If you're tuning in live, just give me a shout. I just want to also test the chat capability here because I'm using OBS in a new way, and I'm seeing whether this is going to work for me to do ongoing, because it's actually quite difficult for me to get the opportunity to put together full recorded videos. And actually, ironically, doing something live is sometimes easier. So that means that I can do something, answer questions in real time, and then I can also make it available as an archive too, and that means that more people benefit from this. So I will get started fairly soon, but it would be good to get a sense if anybody is tuning in live. Like I said, this is a new way of doing things for me. I'm just exploring it, and I've been doing a lot of stuff on Instagram fairly recently because it's a lot easier. But it feels like I'm kind of neglecting this side. Obviously there's a lot of people that have subscribed to this channel, and a lot of people have been interested in stuff, and I've continued making a lot of music, and I just haven't had time to really deconstruct it or go through any of the tutorials that I used to. So this is a method, at least, that I can start to kind of spread information. And okay, I'm getting information. It looks like there are 3 concurrent viewers, which is cool. That's a start, at least. If you are watching live, just give me a shout. Just jump into the chat and say hello. And I'll get started fairly soon. But I'll just explain that, fairly recently, I started to get really quite reflective about my musical history. I started making music in the early 90s. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. But I think my first release on vinyl was in 1993. So there was a real kind of innocence and an energy in the music that I was making in those days, possibly because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I just wanted to make music, and I was being really quite punky about it. So it's very DIY. I had very limited equipment, very simple equipment compared to today's, and so basically I'm trying to go back to that mentality of simplifying things, and also trying to get my headspace into that of the kind of the 23-year-old version of myself, because we're talking about a long time ago, but the equipment in those days was really primitive, and, I couldn't afford great equipment. So I was buying secondhand gear. I remember one of my favorite setups was a Roland W30, which is a 12-bit sampler used by Liam Howlett and The Prodigy and lots of others. And there was a real kind of grimy character to the sound of that sampler. It was great. And it was a workstation, like a keyboard with a screen, and, you did all your sampling into the all-in-one unit. And it was really great, and it was really primitive. But it was something really, really cool about it. And Victor, Let It Flow was from that time. I think I released Let It Flow about 1995. There was a club that was very popular, which was called Shindig. And the guys there, they had their own label, so it was released on their label. I had 2 releases on that label. And that vinyl, I'm really, really pleased that I was able to get something out on plastic. And actually getting, my music on vinyl was a really, it was a real special moment. I think I've got a separate video on this channel when I talked about the idea of going to a mastering house and getting the music cut and seeing that being cut. So, for me, what I'm doing with this series of 5 tracks is really getting back into that time in my mind and kind of revisiting how I used to make music, and in a way kind of trying to take away everything that I've learned in between and try to simplify it. Now, ironically, this tune does use a very, very modern plugin, but in some respects, I'm using it like I would have done before with a sampler as a drum machine, all right? And I'm programming in the same way that I used to program. So, this approach is really about, as I said, it's about simplifying, and also in some cases adding something that gives a kind of vibe and a flavor that sounds old. I'm just deliberately trying to make this thing sound old. And there are 5 releases. Currently, I'm on release 4, but these are being delivered on a weekly basis. So we're getting 1 release every week over 5 weeks. And the reason for that is because I wanted to essentially reboot, almost like turn the power off, turn it on again, and then just say to people that this is the sound that I'm making again. And I will probably continue to do so, because I got bored really of the kind of slightly faster, stabby kind of garagey sound that was more associated, I think, with, in a way, more UK. So I'm trying to go back to that kind of US sound. So US garage, slightly slower tempos, and, you know, really trying to get back into that mentality of what I used to do. And in this case, this track is, look, I'll play it in the background, right? And I'll bring out some things. I'm not sure if the floating plugin windows work because of the way that this is being rendered. I'm using OBS, and it's got Ableton Live as a window, as a source in the OBS. And I know that you can see the arrange window, but also there's a time delay. I've just opened up one of the plugins, and I really do hope that you can see it because it is the Trias plugin. Just a couple of shouts. One small thought. Thank you for tuning in from Sydney, making dinner. Amazing. Marky Fats as well, and Victor 4, I mentioned you earlier, so thank you for tuning in. If there's anybody else on here who wants to say hi, please do. I'll give you a shout on the session. And I will make this available as an archived video. I'm recording it in the background in high quality. It will be available on different platforms as well. So let me just play this. I don't think it's going to show the Trias window, which is kind of frustrating. But you're going to have to take my word for it. So I'll explain what I've got here. And where I can, I'll show you what's happening. Also, give me a level check if you can. You know, this is a new way of doing it. And really what I'm talking about here is the level of the voice against the backing. Good morning, Steve Smith. How are we doing? Thanks for tuning in. So firstly, the drums, as I said, what we've got is a single instance of the plugin Trias. This is from Wave Alchemy, which is a company that makes really great sample libraries, and I've been using their libraries a lot. You know, I mean, everybody's got large drum sample libraries these days, and I just like their approach to sounds and processing of sounds. You know, so they run the old drum machines through classic gear. So straight out of the box, what I'm getting here is something that has a certain vibe and flavor. So let me solo those drums. And what I really do wish you could see the plugin interface here. You're gonna have to take my word for it. Unfortunately, it's not coming through. The reason technically is because on OBS, I'm using the application Ableton Live as a source. It's the application, not essentially the desktop. If it was a desktop, I'd be able to show you the windows, but I haven't found a great way to make that work. So yeah, this is a first effort. We'll continue. I'll hopefully be able to improve and iterate on that. But what I'll do is I'll zoom in. I'll show you the drum programming. So you can see what I did here was that I programmed the beats within Trias. Okay, it's got a really, really great interface for programming drum beats. And what I did there was I used the dynamic levels that you can do in the programming. So there's a 16-step grid, and I was able to program in different levels. So you can see here, if I zoom in, the velocities indicated. You can see down below as well that there's a lot of different velocity levels to create a really nice kind of interesting dynamic when it comes to the programming, particularly around the hats. I'll just solo here, and there is a section where we're before the hats are coming in at the moment, okay? Let me just show you this again. Coming up to a section when the hats will get a bit more regular. You can hear the closed hat there. And those different levels combined with swing, because it does have swing there, that's when the even position, the even numbers are moved slightly to the right. It has a real kind of vibe to it. And, you know, as I said to you, their choice of sounds that they provide within the plugin is great because they're pulling from a library of really great individual one-shot drum samples. The other thing that I did was there was a tom that was contained within the Trias originally. You can see this. I actually put it underneath, and the reason for that is because this particular tom had a ton of bottom end, and what I wanted to do was to essentially allow it to in the gaps between the kicks can continue having that bottom end, if that makes sense. So I separated it out and I rendered it out as audio. And so what we've got here is that tom is on its dedicated track, and I'm using the track spacer plugin to basically receive an input from the kick. So it's allowing the two to coexist. And what this is doing is ducking the volume of the tom, but on a frequency basis. So it's like a dynamic equalizer, where there is bass coming from the kick. It reduces the bass on the tom, but not the other frequencies. And it's at that moment when it's happening. So I will bring these two together so you can hear them. So once again, the beats and the tom. So you can hear the tom there. And it's not hitting at the same time as the kick. I remember now my reason for doing this. So it wasn't, I don't want to make you feel that you're being misled here. When I come back to projects, it's often with a distance. It's been a while since I've looked at it. And particularly with this one, it was made a while ago. And so I have to, in essence, relearn the project. And I remember exactly why I did this now. So this is not, in fact, coming from the kick. And if you've got keen eyes, you would have spotted this. Down below, you can see it's coming from the bass line. So we're going to get to a section where the bass line is playing, and also these other elements are. And so what I found was that the tom was hitting at the same time as a bass note. And what I needed to do was to reduce the level of the tom in that frequency range of the bass at the same time. But I still wanted that energy because it created a really interesting texture on the kind of the upper mids and the highs. I've just noticed there's a question from Carl Alexander Gard. So thanks for tuning in. Okay, so it says, I've switched doors from Cubase to Ableton. So I haven't used Cubase in a while. It's not that I don't like it. And I actually paid for the upgrade for the most recent version. It's a fantastic DAW. But I just find that I work faster in Ableton Live. And, because what I need to do is I need to be super efficient with my compositions, right? I need to be fast. And Ableton Live just allows me to do so, because when I'm making music at specific times. And generally that's in the evening, and I work, because I have a day job, generally I'm doing it from about 9 till 12, because actually most people in my house fall asleep around that time. So it gives me about 3 hours clear every single day. And that's amazing, because it gives me lots of time for composition. So in that time, I like to be efficient. And, like many of you, you've probably got lots and lots of musical ideas. You would not believe the amount of musical ideas that I've got. There are so many of these things, and I create them very, very quickly. And that's thanks to Ableton Live. Not just exclusively Ableton Live, but when I'm working with Machine, you may have seen me using that. I can knock up ideas super quick, and then I can export the audio into Ableton Live as well. So I have different approaches, but the most important thing for me is speed, getting things down quickly, because I have a short attention span, okay? And I am actually diagnosed with ADHD. And what that means is that I move on to the next thing. I'm attracted. I need dopamine hits for something new. So that means that if I stagnate for too long on something, it means that I'm going to lose what I need from it, right? And then what I do is I compartment these tracks. So I jump from track to track to track. And I've got a constant rotation to stop me getting bored. And then what happens is I know that I've got to the point where I'm bored. I stop, I push it away. Then I go to the new one. I do the same until I get bored. I push that away. I go to the next one, push that away. So I'm rotating. But then what I do is I have a gap. I come back to my projects. I go through the list. I find those that are exciting again. And quite often these are rediscoveries, because my memory is short. And then I'll come back to something with tons of energy, because I'm like, oh my God, did I really make that? Then that gives me that buzz and the vibe to dig into it again. And that's when I'll smack down the structure and get that done. Then probably I'll leave it, go on to the next one. But I have all of these musical ideas on my phone so that I can put them into playlists. And then what I do is I listen to them in rotation, quite often when I'm going to sleep. And then what happens is I make a mental note of the things that are missing. And then in a way, it ends up being this polishing phase. So I'm constantly rotating all of these different ideas. And that's just my way, right? That's just the way that I work. It doesn't mean that everybody would work that way. So anyway, I've gone round the houses here trying to explain why Ableton Live works for me. It's the fact that I can get ideas down super quick. Quite often I work in session view, which is this over here, and I'll create ideas and sketches and trigger them using the session, the scenes on the right-hand side, triggering those, triggering individual clips. I do have a push. I'm not using it as much as I used to because it's quite old now. It's push 2. It's not as responsive as it used to be. So I'm just triggering that live, just vibing on it and then building up a structure afterwards. So anyway, that was that. So coming back to this, the tom, I was talking about the fact that I was ducking the tom ducking the tom with the bass. All right, so let's bring that in so you can hear it. There is a section over here where the two, where they're going to be existing. So I'm going to strip things back. I'm only going to have the bass, the beats, and the tom, so you can hear this. So if we go into, I don't know if you can see the interface once again here, like I said at the very beginning, because I'm streaming OBS in a particular way, it doesn't seem to be rendering the plugins, which is a shame. You'll just have to take my word for it. So on here, what I've got going on is that the bass is basically triggering this ducking. It's frequency-dependent ducking, so it's focusing on the frequencies in the bass, taking the lower frequencies out of the tom at that time. But then we get this nice kind of pulsing energy between the bass and the tom. And that was something that I noticed when I was listening to it on a bigger system. I've got these earbuds as well. They're like cheap from Amazon that actually are great for checking out super, super low ends, a sub. And it just sounded messy. So that was why I separated that tom out of the group of those beats that were coming from the Trias plugin. So let's just go back a bit here. Let me just take the solo off so you can hear this. It's a very distinctive brass synth there. And what happened there was I got some new plugins and I was just playing around with stuff. He says, I'm thinking of another track, and it's one of my problems. If I'm just coming, like I said, I'm coming back to project, relearning it. I'm thinking of another synth from another project. But actually, what's interesting, there's still a bit of the history here. So, I mean, as you guys know, when you get new plugins, right, usually you'll get into it and you get excited about it. I recently got a great deal with UAD. There was a bundle of plugins all together at a fantastic price, so I bought that. And it included this, the Polymax synth. I really like it. Once again, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to show you the interface, but I created a patch on the Polymax. So that's the siren, which we're going to come back to. But the brass synth actually is called Gen 1. And what I like about this is it kind of harks back to Robert Owen's I'll Be Your Friend. There was something like a kind of memory trigger there. I wasn't deliberately trying to copy it. But when I came out with it, I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of that. So actually that then created some sense of validation in terms of what I'm trying to achieve is a 90s thing. And here we go. It's kind of like echoing something, a classic track from the 90s. So that was a David Morales production from what I remember. And there was a really great version of that that was in the clubs in the 90s. So bringing everything back. Anyway, a couple of shouts. Studio 21, thanks for joining. Could be some others who are not mentioning anything. If you are here and you're new, just give me a shout, say hi. I'll be archiving this and making it available. So what's interesting about this at the moment, there's no kind of open hi-hat. The building is like a DJ tool thing here. I put this into some of my mix sessions. It mixes really well. There's that synth that I was telling you about. This is kind of like a siren thing that is modulated. The filter cutoff is changing over time. Let me solo this for you. Here we go. I'm using a compressor here, the UAD 1176, which is an emulation of a classic Yuri compressor. I love the sound of that. Same with the LA2A. So that's pretty much why I got these UAD plugins, because I was a big fan of those. So the structure here, what it does, if you see, is it kind of builds up to the moment when the bass line comes in. But when the bass line comes in, it strips everything back. So that's an interesting way to create a shift, So here we go. So there you go. See what I mean? So we've gone from busy to stripped back. And the bass, something I've used a lot. Just going to open this up. Bear with me, it's taking some time. This is a Play Series instrument called Feel It. And once again, I don't think you're seeing the interface, which is a shame. And this is a 90s flavored plugin from Native Instruments. The Play Series, they're these kind of things that sit within Contact. So Contact is a sampler, and these are libraries that people put together that sit within Contact. So Feel It is a deliberate 90s influenced collection of sounds. So that bass works really well. I'll solo that for you so you can hear it. You can see a bit of EQ here, 174 hertz. I dipped it quite a lot actually, 5 dBs, quite a wide curve as well. But I felt I needed that. It was a very heavy bass, too heavy when it was on its own. So once again, we're kind of building things up again, and it's stuff we've already heard, but with the addition of the bass line. We're coming up to a real key moment in the track. I'll stop talking in a second. So you hear that piano, it's a very rich, bright piano. Solo that. And this is contained within that same library. So it's Feel It, it's one of the Play Series instruments from Native Instruments. So let me take it back when that came in. Okay, there's a vocal. Low pass filter, opening up. The filter I used here was the Arturia Filter Mini, which is essentially a plugin which is just the Mini Moog, or Mini Moog, should I say, low pass filter. And now we've got the first appearance of an open hi-hat. Everything else has been quite closed and choppy. Taking the vocal, repeating it with the filter opening up again. Ultimately, a simple production, simple composition. It's really just about the arrangement, few core elements. High string to create some tension now. This is coming from the Korg Triton. There's a preset called Classical Music in the string section. Big dramatic breakdown. When I used to go to events like Ruling at the Ministry of Sound in the mid-90s, it was very much a kind of space, that big massive room with a huge sound system where you can get away with that kind of thing. It was really super dramatic and clean and powerful, to have breakdowns like that. There's no big snare roll or anything here, no over theatrical stuff, because back in the day we didn't really need it, And really here we're just, grooving on out here, really. DJs will be getting the next track queued up, certainly now, I would. Getting ready to make a transition. If I just minimize everything, you can see it's a very, very simple composition. Bear in mind, this Beats is a plugin that is a multitude of different drum samples. Probably using about 10 different samples there, but they're not with separate outputs. They're all being bussed out into the same group, essentially. So yeah, a very, very simple arrangement. Like I said, that's the theme really, is really just to kind of get back to basics, really kind of reflecting back on that period. And, I think, for me, I love this track. I put it into a mix, actually. I'll put a link in below on the archive video. And it's up on SoundCloud. I've taken all 5 tracks from this new series and I've blended them together into a complete mix. It's about 25 minutes. And yeah, in context with each other, they work really, really well. Very proud of them. And yeah, what I did also is get some very distinctive artwork. I've got this kind of Street Fighter style theme visually, and I've done a whole bunch of videos to go on the social platforms with those and the artworks. Very proudly sitting there on Tracksource. I think it's all looking great when you see all of them together. And I may well continue this approach. I certainly feel like I'm enjoying it. One of the most important things with making music is to enjoy it, because if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to want to do it, are you? So, finding a theme is something that I think can really help. Everybody needs their motivation, right, for making music. And for me, themes often drive what I do. And it's like at Christmas time for the last few years, it's the last 2 years, I've created the Night Tales albums. And these are essentially telling a story through the music. But actually, with the last one, I literally told a story with a voiceover. So it's a theme. Like I said, if you need motivation, think of a theme, get a body of work together that sits in that theme. And then it helps you, it's like a milestone, focusing on something. How can you get a bunch of stuff delivered and done? If you have a theme, I think it can really help. It helps motivate. That's one of the most important things when you're making music and trying to keep that energy going, is to have a theme. So anyway, unless there's any kind of final questions, I'm probably going to stop now. If anyone's tuned in who does have a question, they want to raise it now, please do. Because I will be stopping fairly soon, but I will make this available on the archive and I will try to answer some questions on there as well. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Have a great rest of the weekend, and then actually a really great week as well.